I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Head a reeling. I gotta tell you, I'm watching as the Trump turns, spinning way too fast. The insanity, the craziness, the differing stories, the lies, I'm not even going to say half truths, just a complete and total BS. It's getting, and now look, it's been 18 months of drinking from the fire hose to where finally you go, I think I've now cracked. I think this thing with Putin has finally cracked me. I watched him say that, why would it be Russia? I watched him say it. I watched him say, I listened to Pootie. Pootie told me he's a strong guy. He told me nothing. And then I watched the hostage video. I saw with my own two eyes him hunched over and like someone had a knife to his boys going, read this. Where, then he changed it to, well, I meant wouldn't. And I watched him say it. And I watched him say, to be very clear. He was very clear that now this was the new story. This was it. This was the new story. And that, he fully 100% now was on board with the intelligence community's assessment that yes, sir, yes, indeed, the Russians meddled. You would have thought that would have been it. But no, he just couldn't leave it alone. And then came the tweets of how really intelligent people think he did great during the press conference, and head about to explode because today, just the next saga. And a reporter asked the question, do you believe that they would target the U.S. elections, the Russians? This Cecilia Vega asked this very pointed question. You can see the video. You can watch it. You can see them. It looks like there's eye contact. He's got eye contact with somebody. She said, look, is Russia still targeting the U.S., Mr. President? And he says, thank you very much. No. No, she asked. You don't believe that to be the case? And he looked and he was very clear. No. She goes, but can you clarify? You don't believe that to be the case? And he goes off to another question. So as I'm watching this video, I'm going, I really need to know what was in that 2 hour and 15-minute meeting with Putin now. And so do the Senate Democrats, because now they're mounting an effort to go, hey, we need to depose this translator. We've got to know what's going on in there, because here's the problem. Nothing that comes out of this president's mouth can anyone believe. I've even had Trump supporters go, well, he's a little easy with the truth. He's a little loose with the facts. memory's maybe not as good as it used to be. He's a little loose. That's not how diplomacy is done. Understand that if you go into the room and you say something, the other side's going to want to kind of hold you to it. Just kind of a thought. I mean, when I shake somebody's hand and I give my word is my bond. I then don't go outside the door and make up stuff completely opposite to what I said right there. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just, I grew up with this very working class kind of ethic that your word means something. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I didn't get to go to elite prep schools and never have to worry about, where the next meal is going to come from, or if I'm going to have a roof over my head. Maybe that's just being part of the wealth class, that, facts and truth and your word means something. Maybe I've just had it wrong all these years, because I look at this guy and there's virtually nothing that comes out of his mouth that you can believe, or for 20 minutes will be the same. And I'm sure he would be a blast at one of those drinking parties where you whisper something in someone's ear and have it go around the room and see what kind of joy comes out at the other end. I'm sure he would be a blast at that. But that's not how you do foreign policy. Oh, geez, oh man. He also said today, evidently now Putin is responsible for the meddling. He wasn't, maybe, I don't know. There are other people, today, now the story has changed a little bit. He said, asked if Putin was responsible. He said, I would, because he's in charge of the country, just like I consider myself responsible for things that happen in this country. Really? You find yourself responsible for things that happen in this country? Really? You're responsible? Huh. That's news to the rest of us. He goes on to say, so certainly as the leader of the country, you would have to hold him responsible. So that's how now they're going to spin this. That it wasn't Vlad. No, Vlad had nothing to do with it. No. It wasn't Vlad. It was these rogue Russian agents. Yeah, that happens. And, while this is going on with Russia, we still got this thing with North Korea, which evidently is falling apart as fast as possible. And, all of the things that we were promised, remember we were promised, in fact, Trump gave a pep rally, if I remember right, in Duluth, Minnesota, back end of June, I think June 20th, something like that, where he came right out, he blurted it right out. We got back our great fallen heroes. We got them back. The remains sent back today, already 200. 200 gotten back. Well, maybe not. In a CBS interview on July 14th, that we got them back, we got 200 of them back, has kind of changed to, remains are complicated. Some of the remains, we don't even know if they're actually remains. And that's down from, the parents of these people want their children back. I can guarantee you there are probably no parents left. I don't know where that came from. And this is my problem again. This is a guy where nothing is true. It just, whatever sounds good at that moment. Whatever he feels like throwing out, whatever he can say to get you into that used car. Whatever he can say to sell you that lemon, get you down the road, cash your check. That's what it seems. We have got a bad used car salesman as our president. And the rest of the world has got to be freaking out, especially our allies, because what's going on, and, is a total realignment of the world. And really the first time since the end of World War II. I would argue, the first time since, we're talking about an economic realignment, massive realignment, probably the first time since the Bretton Woods Accord. where we divvied up the world and we said this is how things are going to be, and the dollar's a reserve currency, and we'll have these institutions that'll do this stuff. He's completely remaking all of this stuff, and taking sides with autocratic leaders. So I guess we're going to be marrying up to China and Russia now because they're strongmen, and we're going to be turning our back on our allies. And if you're one of our allied countries, if you're one of the other NATO countries, you've got to be freaking out, because nothing this guy says can be trusted. Nothing. And look, I get, wanting to be the strong leader. I get, I even get, wanting the NATO countries to pay a little bit more. I get that. We've been talking about that for years. I get trying to push a little bit on trade. I get that. But the kind of stuff we saw last weekend, just insane. And the fact that he's cozying up to Putin the way he is, and the fact that he's done nothing on China. Oh, did you remember ZTE? Remember how we were banning them? I forgot this last week. Back in business. Put about $400 million in an escrow account in case they never do it again. Slap on the wrist. Back in business. So what's the penalty? Virtually nothing. But yeah, I guess what we got for it is, Ivanka got some cheap labor, and we can get some of her crappy stuff to come back into the country tariff-free. I'm sure that's a part of what we got. And more good news. There's going to be a parade. There's going to be a great, big, beautiful, tremendous parade. The parade will be November 10th. It's going to be around the anniversary, the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. I'm going to commemorate that. We're going to have, soldiers in uniform from different periods. They're going to have planes flying around. It is going to be just, a military love fest. No tanks, however. No heavy machinery. None of the stuff like you see, in the Russian parades or the Chinese parades. None of that stuff. And I think this is going to be really disappointing to Donald. Because, he really likes the big phallic things rolling down the road. I'm sure that's what it is. The problem is with the big phallic things rolling down the road, you would hate to see one of them, swallowed by the road. Our infrastructure is not great. You'd hate to see one of them swallowed up by the entire, going down Pennsylvania Avenue. You'd hate to see that. Evidently, it's going to cost $12 million. And, my mind is there's a lot of things I could do with $12 million than to have a parade. But evidently, we're going to do it because, hey, we saved $14 million when we gave up the U.S. South Korea Freedom Guardian exercises for preparedness with us in South Korea. So we've saved money by not having these exercises, which I'll be honest, I could care less about. But where I do care about it is, this is one of the things that Trump gave away. This is one of the things that North Korea has wanted forever. This is one of those things that they can go back to their state media and say, see, we got them. We won. We beat them. We didn't give anything up. And we stopped them. Our threats of nuclear power and domination stopped them from having these things. And what did we get? We got more promises that everything's going great. Everything's going great. Yeah, going great. But at least we'll have a parade with flyovers and, we can have face painting for the kids and have them bayoneting each other. It'll be great. It'll be fabulous, tremendous. Don't worry about it. $12 million, drop in the bucket. Love to hear your thoughts. Big on the parade? Don't care really, but I'm sure I'll be there protesting. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, with all of this talk of Trump and Russia and all of this talk of the insanity, what we haven't been talking much about, Supreme Court. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with the Supreme Court and, what Democrats need to be doing to, save the 20th century progress that we made. Yeah, little things like that. Quick break. Right back with David Faris.
Own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. That was the day hospital workers in Charleston, South Carolina, won union recognition. The 113-day strike reflected all the broader social issues of the day. Led primarily by black women, the strike at the medical college, Charleston County, and several other hospitals intersected civil rights and racial and gender discrimination on the job. Jewel Charmaine Debnam notes that women like Local 1199B President Mary Moultrie, Naomi Watts, and others were essential to the strike not only as daily participants on the picket line, but also as leaders of the local movement establishment. For months, strikers marched, walked picket lines, clashed with police, and held vigils demanding their right to organize. They defied injunctions and endured hundreds of arrests, nightly curfews, and confrontations with state National Guard. Governor McNair and the hospital boards had initially refused to concede to the workers' demands for union recognition. They claimed workers paid with public funds could not engage in collective bargaining. But the women were steadfast. They pointed to the wage disparities between black and white workers and between male and female workers. They also protested the blatant disrespect and discrimination meted out daily by management. Local longshoremen stood in solidarity with the strikers and threatened a walkout in support if their demands were not met. Coretta Scott King and many other civil rights leaders also played a supportive role. Finally, the union won reinstatement of fired workers, which had touched off the strike. They also won a solid grievance procedure, a minimum wage, and access to a credit union. Victory would be short-lived, however, when the state almost immediately refused to hold up its end of the agreement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. David Faris, no show. I had wanted to talk to him about his article on Democrats, considering the idea of court packing when they regain power. And look, it sounds like an interesting idea. I don't know that I'm thrilled with the idea. I know FDR had proposed it, and there was the whole switch in 9 to save 9 thing and all of that. I hope to get through that because, to be honest, the Supreme Court to me is one of the most important issues right now because, look, at the end of this, if Kavanaugh is seated and you allow Gorsuch to sit on the court, you now have a conservative majority for the next generation and kiss the 20th century goodbye. All of the progress that was made from the greatest generation and all the progress that people fought in the streets for, it goes by the wayside. And to me, that's really troubling. I see we got David Faris on the line. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, Rick.
So, I saw your article over at the Washington Post, and I thought, this is one of those ideas that pop up occasionally, and I've been hearing it a lot lately. Why should we consider this? And, why should Democrats even entertain this idea, given what's happened with the filibuster?
Well, I think that the first and most important reason is to rectify the terrible injustice that happened in 2016. When Republicans broke with all precedent in our history and decided not to even hold a hearing for Barack Obama's nominee to replace Scalia on the Supreme Court. That was a brazen act of democratic sabotage. They didn't apologize for it. They don't even, I don't even think they did anything wrong. And in effect, they stole the swing seat on the Supreme Court. And we've already seen the consequences of that with recent decisions about public employee unions, which is devastating to organized labor. And now we have this second appointment to the court that President Trump gets to make, even though he's a minority president, right? So I think that Democrats really need to think about responding in kind, because Republicans are right when they say that they were not constitutionally obligated to entertain the Garland nomination, because the Senate's advice and consent obligations are not spelled out very clearly in the Constitution. And in the same way, the Supreme Court is not spelled out very clearly in the Constitution, and the Constitution doesn't say how many justices are on the court. So to me, adding justices to the court is about functionally the same thing as stealing the swing seat on the Supreme Court.
Right.
And I don't see any reason why we shouldn't do that the next time that we're in power.
Well, let me ask you the other side of that then. What's to stop Trump and the Republicans right now from just going, you know what? We want to add 10.
Sure. I mean, nothing is stopping them, right? I mean, the only thing that's stopping them right now is, I think, is McConnell's procedural commitment to what remains of the filibuster. And also, I don't think they have the votes to do this, nor do I think that we have the votes to do this right now. So it's like, I think everybody knows that they can do this, but there's a long-standing tradition in American politics that you don't tinker with the size of the Supreme Court, which we haven't really done since the 1860s. And so there's very good reasons why that hasn't happened, and I think there's good reasons not to do it. And in the absence of the sort of the power play with Merrick Garland, I wouldn't even be talking about this. But openings on the Supreme Court, they're a lottery. Jimmy Carter got 0 nominations to the Supreme Court, and now Trump gets 2 in his first 2 years. It's crazy.
No, it is crazy. And as you point out in your article, and rightly so, I mean, conservative Republicans have been in power a certain amount of years and have had the majority of the Supreme Court justice. I forget the numbers you used, but it was something like 15 of the 20 over the last 15 of the 19 over the last 50 years. As you point out, almost 79%. Yet they've been in power only 62%. So they've had outweighed power in putting justices on the court.
Yeah, and honestly, the only reason that we have not come to this crisis point earlier is a couple of mistaken Republican nominees. So Gerald Ford appointed John Paul Stevens, and Ronald Reagan appointed Sandra Day O'Connor, and then George H.W. Bush appointed David Souter. And to different degrees, those 3 justices would occasionally or frequently vote with the liberals. Stevens became one of the key members of the liberal bloc. So it's like this has actually been going on for a while, where the appointment process has been extremely unfair to Democratic presidents, just by virtue of luck, and then Republicans compounded that by not agreeing to seat a Democratic nominee to the court, which is so outrageous. Like, when I think about it, my blood boils, and I think it deserves a real response in kind. Now, I do think that Democrats should offer a truce in the form of a constitutional amendment to routinize this process. So there's a way to amend the Constitution so that all Supreme Court justices could serve 18 years on the court and then retire, and then every president gets the right to appoint a justice in his or her first and third year in office. And that would really dial down the temperature on all this stuff. But I don't think that they're going to agree to that. So,
of course not. Not when you have the power. I mean, this is one of those moments where the Republicans have been working towards this for decades, and this is all part of the grand scheme, if you will. I mean, when the Federalist Foundation our society was dreamt up, this was kind of the goal. We bring these lawyers along, we find them in law school or even maybe before, and we bring them along and give them the credentials and keep them on the page so they never have to answer the abortion question or any of those other questions. They already know who these people are. This is well thought out. This is well planned. This is well funded, and the rest of us are just waking up to that reality.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a 30-year project for the right to take the Supreme Court to capture the federal judiciary, and it came out of frustration in the 80s with what I was just talking about, where Republican presidents would appoint justices to the court only to find that they weren't sufficiently rigid in their ideology. So they started this sort of like networking society, the Federalist Society, to ensure that future Republican presidents would have a deep bench of committed ideologues to draw from for their judicial nominations. And what they really wanted to make sure was that all future nominations for Republicans, and this really started with the George W. Bush administration, that all of these future nominations would be originalists, that they would be sort of dogmatically committed to the original interpretation of the text, or, whatever the words, if there's ambiguity, whatever the words meant to people at the time. which requires judges to be historians, and it's all completely crazy. And was thought of as completely crazy as recently as 40 years ago. So it's testament to how successful that project has been that it's taken so seriously, and that it's had such an impact at the national level. And so they're on the verge of doing really transgressive things, like something like declaring the Social Security Act to be unconstitutional.
No, I say this all the time. And I go back to, you look at the Lochner era, where they, they shot down, minimum wage laws, maximum hour laws, child labor laws, work safety standards. They shot all this down, citing liberty of contract, because at the time, that was the Supreme Court's decision. And I fear we're quickly going back to that. I mean, we're certainly almost back to yellow dog contracts, which the court at one point then ruled unconstitutional with this latest Epic Systems case. That evidently now we're all subject to forced mandatory arbitration clauses. So much for my constitutional right to the court system.
Yeah, and that's a Lochner era argument, right? And the Lochner era argument was the one that they brought against the ACA too. Right, which was a freedom of contract, like you can't make me buy something on the private market argument. That really harkened back to this dark period of Supreme Court history, where the court ruled against working people again and again and again in favor of corporate interests. And so people laugh at me when I say I think that they might overturn the Social Security Act, but it's like when you look at the jurisprudence of the four people that are on this court already, plus Brett Kavanaugh, it's not inconceivable that they would do something like this. Or in a future Democratic presidency, like if we pass Medicare for all or something, they will find a way. Like they will reach back into the jurisprudence of the Lochner era, which they all admire, which they're all on record as admiring, and they will find a way to strike it down. So this is a crisis. This is a Democratic crisis where the Supreme Court has an ideology that is vehemently opposed by the vast majority of the American people, but they are now in a position to kind of lord it over us for the next 10 or 12 years.
Yeah,
so, or longer.
Where they've actually weaponized the court, or they're in the process of doing that. And I look at this and I ask the question, because, when I read your story, I'm going, okay, well, I don't know that Democrats have the spine for that. They really, if you got somebody in a street fight, a Democrat's not the guy you want by your side. Maybe to hold your coat. I don't know. But, not so much in the fight. But, then I started thinking about what's coming. And we know Roe versus Wade is going to be under attack. We know that, a lot of the voting rights stuff is going to go by the wayside. We know police state type, tactics are going to be okay. And I started thinking about, the kind of protests and the kind of, the anger that this is going to grow. I mean, we're talking about, massive civil unrest if this stuff happens. And then maybe Democrats then have the spine. And I look at your article in the Milton Friedman mentality. It's the ideas that are lying around when crisis hits. So here it is.
Yeah. And I think the next Democratic majority is going to be faced with a very stark choice. Even in our miracle scenarios, I don't think we get to 60 votes in the Senate. That means the next majority is going to have to be willing to eliminate the filibuster to get anything done. If they don't want all of their legislation eventually smacked down by the Supreme Court, we need a solution for this illegitimate conservative majority that's currently on the court. So my idea is, you give New Course 7 days to resign. You offer them a truce in the form of a constitutional amendment. They'll say no, and then you pass a law. All you have to do to add justices to the court is pass a simple law. Both houses of Congress signed by the president, and suddenly there's more justices on the Supreme Court. It's perfectly constitutional, in the same way that Garland was. And I think if they don't do that, what Democrats are going to find is that they will be in exactly the position Republicans are in right now, which is a very thin record of legislative accomplishments, and the ire of the American people, because the Americans feel like, oh, we sent this majority to Washington. They can't get anything done. And there's this crisis on the court. I expect Roe v. Wade to be overturned in the next year. I mean, it's disturbing, but it's true. And I think that's going to cause a lot of demands on our side of the partisan base to do something much more radical than we're talking about right now. And that's why I think that's why we're talking about court packing right now.
No, and I think it's
sort of understanding.
No, you're right, and I think it's important to remember the FDR era because FDR, it was always famously said, you want something done, make me do it. And this is where having people marching in the streets and in politicians' ears, constantly forcing them to do what the will of the people is I think that's why it's so important to remember that era, and also to talk about this the FDR era of court packing, because you actually went into a little bit of the history of it, which I didn't know. That the reason that it didn't go forward is because FDR was so rigid in what he wanted that they could have gotten something lesser.
Yeah, I mean, this is an amazing. The thing I found when I started doing research for the book that I wrote about all this is that FDR's plan was to allow him to add a justice to the court for everyone that was over 70, and so that would have at the time given him the right to put 6 additional justices on the court. So it would have gone from 9 to 15. And the public opinion was relatively split because the public was really outraged that the Supreme Court had repeatedly struck down these New Deal reforms like the National Industrial Recovery Act and the Agricultural Adjustment Act. And there was fear that the court would strike down Social Security, which was going to be a signature accomplishment in his second term. And so FDR was really committed. He didn't believe that 2 or 3 or 4 justices would be enough. Like, he thought he needed 6 to make sure that all of these reforms would survive. And he was obviously wrong about that. And I think what's been lost to history is that I think the history that we remember that we were taught in school was like, this was a big disaster. He was handed a huge political defeat, and then the court started changing its mind about important cases. This list switch in time that saved 9, right?
Yeah. Because I remember it was the big case was what was it? It was Parrish versus West Coast Hotel, which kind of flipped a lot of the Lochner era, the mentality that stated that they could have maximum hour laws and that there could be minimum wage. And that, to me, if I remember the history, that was the turning point.
It was. So they confirmed, they upheld a Washington state minimum wage law that was very, very similar to one that the court had struck down in 1936 in New York State. And so the sort of the political memory of that period is that FDR's pressure, while he failed to pack the court, the pressure that he placed on the justices led them to change their votes. But that's also kind of wrong because that case had already been adjudicated internally by the time that FDR made this threat to pack the court. So it's interesting. Historians don't really actually know why a couple of these conservative justices changed their vote on this minimum wage law, and there's a lot of dispute about this. But the point is that his allies in Congress actually would have been willing to go along with a plan that added 2 or 4 justices to the court, or 3, just not 6. Right? They were like, this is too much.
It's a bit too far.
And he wouldn't compromise. So I think that we would remember this era very differently if he had been able to immediately expand the court to 11 or even to 13 instead of 15 as he wanted. I think he actually would have gotten his way. Ultimately, obviously, it was not necessary because, again, there was this change in the ideological composition of the court. And then later in 1937, some of these guys started retiring. Because FDR, at the time, he was the first president not to get to appoint anyone to the court in a full presidential term from 33 to 37. So he was very frustrated in the same way I'm sure that Carter was.
Right. And
I'm sure in this.
I look at this and, you go back to, the original intent people. Who say that, lifetime appointments and all that. Lifetime appointments back then, people didn't live much past 35 or 40. So a lifetime appointment may have been, 5-10 years, not 40 years, which we could conceivably, you could look at, one of, Neil Gorsuch being there 35 years.
Yeah. I mean, Neil Gorsuch could be around until I'm dead. I mean, and, the average justice on the court over the last 30 years has served 27 years. And that is a sort of a vast expansion of the time spent on the Supreme Court from when the founders were crafting this document. As you said, like if you made it to 60 in 1787, that was a miracle. So appointing somebody aged 50 to the Supreme Court in 1789, you'd expect them to serve 5 or 10 years, whereas today you'd expect them to spend 30. And that's why, I wasn't surprised when Kennedy stepped down. I mean, he's 83. I'm not working when I'm 83. I'm going home. I'm spending time with my grandkids. And so I think the whole system is just bananas. And so if we could even use the threat of court packing to get a kind of compromise that takes these battles out of the political realm and makes them sort of constitutionally mutually understood on both sides, what our obligations and what our rights are, I think that would be a huge victory. And at the end of the day, if we have to pack the courts to get that done, I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with it too, but I just don't. I know Democrats, and that's my
No,
problem.
I know. Yeah, I think Schumer is going to have to go to get this done. The last 4 months of leadership from the Senate Democrats has been deeply disappointing to me. Everything from the Dodd-Frank rollback to just the tenor of pushback on what's happening in the country right now. They seem too happy, too content, too smug in the assumption that we're going to take power. And I just don't feel the outrage and the sense of crisis that I think that everyone in the base and the activists and the people that are really driving the resistance to President Trump right now, I think we need to see more from our leaders than we're seeing right now.
I'm right there with you. David, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Great piece. I enjoyed it. I'd love to have you come back and talk with us again some point in the near future.
Rick, anytime. I appreciate it.
Good stuff.
I had a great time chatting with you.
Thanks so much, David Faris. You want to check out the article, Democrats Must Consider Court Packing When They Regain Power? We'll get a link. Also, check out his book. It's Time to Fight Dirty is the name of the book. Maybe we'll get him back to talk about the book. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Together, we can make America better. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That Friday, thousands of workers in the Chicago stockyards walked off the job. A serious union organizing drive had been underway in the yards since June. One of the organizers of the butchers was John Kikulski. John declared it would be a campaign that included workers who were Polish, Irish, Lithuanian, and in fact, every race, color, creed, and nationality. This was an important pledge because earlier unionization efforts had failed to unite the workforce and had often excluded black workers. Yet the years of racial barriers to unionize proved hard to break down. While 90% of the white workers joined the union, black recruitment lagged behind. Tensions between the newly arriving Eastern European workers and more established white workers also simmered. Despite these setbacks, the stockyard owners were alarmed by the success of the union drive. They sent in 300 mounted policemen to disrupt union meetings and monitor the workers' movements. Angered at the police presence, 10,000 workers walked off the job. They returned to work on Monday, but began organizing for a strike. On July 26th, the workers issued their demands to management for better pay and safer working conditions. The next day would be one of the most infamous days in Chicago history. A group of white Chicagoans stoned and killed a black boy who was swimming and had accidentally drifted into a whites-only part of Lake Michigan. For the next week, a race riot engulfed the neighborhoods surrounding the stockyards. 1,000 black families lost their homes to arson. 23 black and 15 white residents were killed. Any hope of racial unity had been crushed, and as a result, the strike failed. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thoughts are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Working hard to make a left, red shed a bomb red. The father son left a carry on, blue denim had his vein. He's a working class man.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So we've all heard it. It's almost nonstop. I love listening to right-wing talk radio because they always whine how they're the underdog and how everybody's out to get them and how they're the mainstream liberal media is keeping them down and how everybody they're the victims. And you gotta give them credit, and I do. It's really difficult when you control an entire medium to still claim that you're the underdog and you're the victim or the little guy slaying that liberal Goliath. And yet we hear it at every front. The IRS is out to get them. When you look at reality, the IRS went after both sides equally. Facebook is killing them. Oh, you can't get any of their crazy right-wing memes out. And again, The louder they are, the more they whine and complain. The more that I guess it goes back to that old the squeaky wheel gets the grease theory. And here to share some thoughts on the whiny right, I've asked Melissa Ryan to come talk with us. She's a visiting fellow at Media Matters for America, also editor of the Control Alt Right Delete. Melissa, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So, am I getting this right? Because, I keep hearing these people just whine and complain. And it's almost like, when they were kids, their parents never smacked them to shut up.
Well, I mean, it has an interesting history. I think the most recent round of conservatives whining about Facebook actually comes from when Mark Zuckerberg was testifying in front of the Senate, and Ted Cruz asked a question about Diamond and Silk right-wing social media personalities supposedly being censored. And then from that YouTube video, Ted Cruz managed to raise just a lot of money from his supporters over the supposed censorship of Diamond and Silk. So the next day when Mark Zuckerberg testified before the House, half the Republicans on the committee were asking questions about Diamond and Silk and their supposed censorship. And Facebook really still wasn't prepared. Certainly Mark Zuckerberg wasn't prepared with a great answer.
Yeah.
So conservatives have just continued down this drumbeat. What they haven't offered is any data. So Media Matters, we actually did a study of 6 months of 463 leading political Facebook pages. And what we found is that partisan pages that cover political news actually have roughly equal engagement online. But we also found that right-wing pages actually drastically outnumber left-wing pages. So not only are conservatives not having a problem getting their content through on Facebook, but they're actually saturating Facebook with a lot more content than the left.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And my question always comes back to how many of them are Russian military officers?
Well, that, we didn't look into that.
But, to go to the point of censorship, since you brought up Diamonds and Rust, they blocked me on Twitter. I sent 2 comments their way of some hypocrisy that they threw out. And you want to talk about censorship? They blocked me, and I'm going, but I thought we were here to engage in discussion. Evidently not.
Yeah, what was interesting, because the House Judiciary a couple of months ago actually devoted an entire hearing to Diamond and Silk, where they came as witnesses. And what was fascinating to me was they clearly either don't understand how Facebook works or they don't want to understand, which is unusual because social media, people who make a living on social media, they generally live and die by the metrics. And Diamond and Silk lacked a basic understanding of how Facebook even works. They also claimed in that hearing that Donald Trump and Sarah Palin, 2 right-wing figures that have extremely high engagement on Facebook, were being censored. So there's just no data or reality to back up these claims.
But, I watched the testifying there during that moment, and I'm still wondering why we haven't, they haven't been, brought up on some perjury charges or lying at the minimum. But, I look at this and, to me, they are the typical right-wing kind of media figures. They just throw stuff out and, facts be damned, reality be damned. They've got their own alternative reality, their own alternative facts. And, anything coming close to sanity, never mind.
Yeah, and this is where I think it's really important to put the pressure on Facebook and tech companies to take a stand for objective truth. There was another hearing today in the House Judiciary Committee. This one, the tech companies actually showed up to testify. The last one, they refused. And, I think Democrats were very on message and gave them a lot of space to stand up for themselves. And what you saw was the tech companies, in particular Facebook, were not ready, not able to say, a lot of this content is just not true. And it's just fascinating that, our tech companies won't take a stand for objective truth. And they seem to follow this line that truth is a partisan issue, and it's not.
Yeah, but who's going to be the arbiter of that? And this is where, I think everybody's a little queasy about, do we really want Facebook or Twitter or, and you go down the list of any of the social media sites censoring what people say. To me, it comes back to some of the claims that I see coming out of the right, and even some from the far left are so out of mental bounds that no rational person should believe them. But yet, we have people who keep, to me, it keeps coming back to us that we've got to be more judicious in what we consume and think about what it is we regurgitate.
I think in an ideal world, we would have better government regulation of social media, and frankly, we would have social media companies working together on a set of standards as well. We don't live in that ideal world.
Yeah.
We've found that, I think that corporate pressure campaigns are our best chance to make a difference. What worries me is so often individuals are just told that the solution is on you completely. And I don't know how individuals are supposed to just keep up with the algorithms of Facebook and Twitter. I mean, I study fake news all day. I will still fall for it on occasion. I think it's unfair to ask the individual to take on that much of a burden when the failure is clearly with the tech companies.
Let me ask you this, because, I threw this out, 2 years ago, because I'm uncomfortable having a bunch of, people who, I can't tell you how many people attack me on Twitter who are patriotic grandmothers who misspell almost every third word and have poor English. But, they're patriotic grandmothers from Ohio who, they love their country and they love Donald Trump and go down the list. Nobody knows who they are. I've been under this belief that at some point we've got to verify every person who goes into these, that has a Twitter account. I'm verified. A lot of people are. I think you are. I think once you have to put your name on the line and it's you saying it and not some, I'm some secretive, kind of pseudonym name. Maybe we become a little bit, more judicious in what we say, a little bit more cautious in what we throw out, or the extreme stuff that we talk about or attack people on.
I mean, I'm loath to go for complete verification because there are, times and places where the ability to be anonymous to do political speech are important. So I think it's a balancing act. And I think what is true, you got to remember these companies are multinational. And what we're dealing with in America is a little different than a country who does not have the free and democratic society that we do. So I think we have to be really careful when we start talking about verification and ending anonymity on the internet.
No, that's an interesting point. But it's always been this thing. You get these people who just they say the most vile things because they feel that
right.
there's this cloak of secrecy and that you're never going to be able to find them. And they can say that, they would never say the stuff that they say to you online to your face. And I go back to being a kid. You said something stupid, somebody smacked you, you didn't do it again. And everybody seemed to get along a lot better. I'm trying to figure out how we move forward in this world of just, some people feeling that they have the right to say the most vile things to people.
Yeah, my favorite one recently has been trolls with 15 followers telling me that no one cares what I think online. That's been a consistent line of attack, which is highly amusing to me because someone would clearly have to create a Twitter account to say that exact thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary stuff. So, in looking at this, because it's not going away, the right wing, the ultra conservative crying that, they're being censored. And I've argued that they actually get more because of it. And I think as you guys may have found out, that, like Facebook actually brought, more of them in to try and, quell some of that whining. I don't think it works, but, for them it does.
It's a losing strategy for Facebook to engage with these folks. The Trump campaign, Republican campaigns, and party committees, Facebook has the voters they need to reach. They are not going to stop spending money on Facebook because they want to win elections. And I think Facebook needs to acknowledge that. Facebook has bent over backwards trying to appease the Republican Party. It hasn't worked. They've only gone in stronger. I think the next thing Facebook really needs to do is there's this conservative bias review that they have John Kyle, a former senator and lobbyist, running. It's time to disband that, particularly now that Kyle is doing consulting for the White House on the Supreme Court nomination. Facebook wins nothing from continually caving to the Republican Party. They will only be continually bullied.
Yeah, and so, where do you see the path forward then? I mean, if Facebook does go away, what should they be doing?
I think Facebook has to draw a hard line on hate speech. I think it has to draw a hard line on truth, and something I've become particularly passionate about. In fact, I believe we talked about the last time I was on your show, minors and who are become the victims of conspiracy theories that spread on Facebook and on other platforms, and Facebook does just so little to get that off the platform and protect these kids. And I just think those three actions for Facebook would help go a long way, with their consumer base overall. I mean, they've really got to start worrying about the trust that they have lost with their consumers.
Now, I'll be honest with you. I haven't I haven't really used Facebook in probably 3 or 4 years. We put our, we put our podcast stuff up. We throw something here or there, but I personally don't use it at all. Because, to be honest, the first time I remember seeing click here to give us all of access to all of your photos, me going, no, not doing that. And that was the end of it for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the good news is I think Facebook knows that they have a lot of trust to regain with their consumers. That's why every city I travel to these days, I see Facebook ads in the public transit. They're running TV ads. They know that they've done wrong, but they've still got a lot further to go before they actually regain most of our trust.
Yeah. Now, just to be clear, the whining on the right is never going to stop, is it?
No.
So the more that they give in, the more that they cave, the more that they try and appease them, it's only going to make it worse.
Yes.
So at some point,
the sooner the Facebook realizes that, the better.
Exactly. At some point, when you practice a little tough love and say, "Sit down and shut up," maybe it stops.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, that's a start, right?
Yep.
It's a start. Melissa, I appreciate the time, the thoughts. Good stuff.
Thanks so much for having me.
As always, good stuff talking to Melissa Ryan, visiting fellow there at Media Matters for America. She's also the editor of Control, Alt, Right, Delete. We'll make sure we get links out so people can take a look at it. Let's take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1914. That was the day IWW songwriter Joe Hill was sentenced to be executed in Utah. He was convicted of murder, although the charges were likely trumped up. Hill grew up in Sweden. His father died from an occupational injury in 1877, and the children had to quit school and go to work. When Hill's mother died 2 years later, Joe came to America with his brother. He worked in various cities throughout the country. When he was in California in 1910, Joe joined the International Workers of the World. His songs were compiled into the IWW's Little Red Songbook. Hill had his first run-in with police during the San Pedro dock workers' strike in 1913. He was arrested and held for 30 days on the charge of vagrancy because, he said later, he was a little too active to suit the chief of the burg during the strike. In 1914, Hill was charged with the murder of a grocer and his son in Salt Lake City. The evidence was circumstantial. The jury found him guilty even though neither witness for the prosecution could identify Hill conclusively, and the gun used in the murder was never recovered. Hill penned the famous words, "Don't mourn, organize," in a letter to fellow IWW organizer Big Bill Haywood before his execution by firing squad. His body was cremated and the ashes mailed to IWW locals in every state but Utah.
I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We want the world and we want it now. We're going to take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Go back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. I'm still in the mindset that verification is the way to go. Because it's my view that, and I do this in my own dealings with people. If someone sends me a direct message or responds to something, if they're who they are, if they're verified, I'll respond to them probably much quicker. and I'll have more of a back and forth than if, it's somebody who's following 1,000 people and has 2 followers. And, and it's because I've learned the learned behavior here is that, this is somebody who's simply trolling. There's no point here other than just to get a rise. And that's been my experience. And, I go back to this, and maybe it's because I'm the age I am, that I still remember when people talk to each other. Back when, being able to look into a phone and talk to somebody while seeing them was still a fantasy. Was still something wow, that would be cool. Now it's reality. I'm still someone who believes that if you say something, you should own it. And this anonymity stuff, I don't like. I think it's destructive. And I guess I can see Melissa's point that for when you're talking politics, it could be unpopular to state your true positions, like being a Nazi. It's kind of unpopular to be a Nazi, as it should be. I fear that this anonymity gives people the ability to say the most vile things. It's just that's it. And there's part of me again. I go back to if everyone had to own up to what they say and what were the positions they take, would we have the kind of coarse discourse we have? I don't know. I did want to respond to one of our Twitter comments. I said earlier in the program, I guess you're cozying up to China and Russia now that they're strongmen. And M. McConnell, responded, if you don't agree, that means you want war. And no, I responded back, so those are my choices. I have to surrender to strongmen, or we have to go to war. Those are my choices. I don't get anything in between. And he responded back with that's how they're framing it. Crazy. And that is how they're framing it. We have to surrender to these. We have to fall in the line. We have to be obedient, or bad stuff is going to happen. And this is the problem with people who don't understand diplomacy or democracy. And I started thinking today, what if Donald Trump were president during the Bay of Pigs? What if you had this moment where one of our destroyers is sitting on top of a Russian nuclear sub, and the phones are ringing back and forth, and there's tense conversation and tense diplomacy going on? Do you trust Donald Trump to hear the right thing and then to respond the first time with what he means and not have to call back, oh, gee, I changed my mind? Because, and this is my very real fear. I'm sure he would be a fun guy. Look, I grew up, talking to senile old narcissists when I was a kid, and my mother worked in a nursing home, so I'm kind of used to it. This guy shouldn't be president. And the other thing M. McConnell pointed out that and this has been the talking point for a while, not just today, that the Russia probe is the new birtherism. This is how they're trying to poo-poo this all away, and that they're claiming, well, it's all what we did to Obama. And it's one of those things that kind of, it gives their base the ability to dismiss whatever is going to come out. The fact that there are 33 indictments. The fact 5 people have pled guilty. One's in jail. Some more are probably going. There are probably hundreds of indictments more to come. We're going to need a new wing onto San Quentin. And I guess if this is how the base needs to be able to wake up, I guess this is how it's going to happen. Very, very frustrating stuff. But on the social media front, there's got to be a way to rein in some of the vile stuff that I get. And look, email does it too. So I don't know how you do it, but I definitely don't feel comfortable with Twitter or Facebook censoring what people say. And that's where I have this problem. I have this problem with any type of censorship whatsoever. I think if you say what you mean what you say, and you take the consequences for what it is that you say. That's my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
Insanity reigns. Hidebound Donald Trump partisans keep insisting that their man is not certifiably insane, despite a mountain of evidence to the contrary. But surely, some of them finally must admit that his policy of snatching immigrant children from their parents' arms at the Mexican border and incarcerating the tykes for weeks in warehouse cages far away from any contact with mom and dad is the epitome of Kafkaesque insanity. Trump's political assault on kids, toddlers, and even infants is so cuckoo crazy that it's infectious. In June, for example, Fox News trumpeter Laura Ingraham dismissed reality by declaring that the children's holding cells, quote, are essentially summer camps. Then her sister Fox News commentator Ann Coulter babbled that the reality of Trump troopers seizing and terrifying kiddos was not actually happening. Those child actors weeping and crying on all the other networks 24/7 right now, don't fall for it, Mr. President. For his part, our immigrant-bashing Mr. President began to rant like a dotty old geezer that he would not allow, quote, these people to be given any legal avenue to address their plight. No judges or court cases, he barked in a series of tweets. Tell the people out, and they must leave, just as they would if they were standing on your front lawn. This is Jim Hightower saying, old man Trump is not only a callous grump, but he's also gone completely screwy about the essential role of the rule of law in our nation. In fact, if you stood on the front lawn of his Mar-a-Lago resort, he might have you removed by force, but you'd have access to a court to plead your case and seek justice. That's the American way, whether an autocratic property owner likes it or not. Unless, of course, His Highness arbitrarily nullifies 230 years of legal protections for the people's democratic rights.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone in a time of need.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. A new report fresh out from the White House Council on Economic Advisors. Evidently, the war on poverty over. I guess it's largely over. Mostly over. And we've won. Congratulations, poverty over. Success. Which is weird to me, very weird. In that, I remember conservatives saying that, it was the war on poverty was a giant waste of money. We spent trillions of dollars. It was just wasted on those people. Now the argument is, hey, we won. Now, interestingly enough, we know what's coming next, more cuts to social programs and gutting Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all of that. But now under the banner of we won, as opposed to it was a waste of money. So there you go. We won. Congratulations. Anyway, here in Pennsylvania, huge election, probably the biggest of my lifetime. The governor's race and lieutenant governor's race. Scott Wagner wins. Pennsylvania's a right to work state within record time. To me, that's the central issue. I'm here to talk about the campaign, what he's finding on the trail. I've asked our good friend John Fetterman to come talk with us. John's the mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, also the nominee for the Democratic lieutenant governor's spot. John, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, always a pleasure to be on your show, no matter when and where.
And I know you were out there pounding the pavement, putting more miles on the vehicle.
Yep. My F-150's got about 53,000 miles on it, and just was at Ocean City for a couple of days with the family, and stopped on we're on our way back. Stopped at a great Democratic event in Shippensburg, and then tomorrow we're in Erie, and then in Lancaster on Friday. So we're all out across the state.
Yeah, good on you. I saw the picture of you and your family at the beach. It's very nice. What's with the black shirt still? Doing the black shirt thing?
No, it's just a swim shirt, you know. But you know, I had a questionable mole taken off my shoulder and from sun exposure, so I just you know, it's an SPF 30 shirt.
Look at that. I wear a shirt at the beach too, so don't feel bad. And harpoons, I'm afraid of. But here's the thing. You know, I'm looking at this election, and am I being hyperbolic? Do you think that this is the most important election of most of our lifetimes?
Well, it's certainly the most consequential midterm election that I can possibly think of. You know, 2016, I think, certainly was the most important of my lifetime, and it went the wrong way. And you see the fallout that's occurring there, and whether it's Mr. Trump's conduct at the Helsinki with Putin, and then the massive threat with the Supreme Court nominee, and you know, even if Trump is impeached or loses, whatever, if he puts a second justice on the Supreme Court, it's got a permanent right slant. And, you know, you have Janice, and then, you know, Roe v. Wade next, and, you know, every policy or every program that we hold dear and has helped prop up the working families in the United States is going to go there, and it's going to go to a stacked court. So it's so much is at stake, and the bottom line here in Pennsylvania, as you pointed out, Scott Wagner, we go right to work the next day, basically, and everything else will follow. So I just tell people, like, look, whatever it is that you care about, it's all really going to change dramatically if Tom Wolf doesn't get a second term.
No, I'm right there with you. And, you know, this is one of those moments where, you know, as you point out, the Supreme Court could conceivably repeal the entire 20th century. And I had a conservative friend who, after the election of 2016, said it's going to be really interesting to watch liberals become states' rights advocates and conservatives become federalists. And, you know, we're kind of starting to see that dynamic.
Oh, no, it should never be that way, because the Supreme Court was never intended to be a partisan weapon, and it's been weaponized from a partisan standpoint. It needs to be a dynamic body that comes and goes, you know, leans right, leans left, back and forth, but not a sharp partisan, you know, balance the way it is, you know, or will be right now, and because it'll take our country in a dramatic direction, and we'll have a states' right for the next 25 years. I mean, Anthony Kennedy is retiring at the end of his. He was appointed in 1987. I'm 48 years old. I was listening to Poison, and I had a speed Walkman. That's how long this man's been on the Supreme Court, and the next appointee will have that same kind of effect. I mean, 1988. Think how much the world has changed since 1988, and that's how consequential these judicial appointments are, and that's what's so scary and alarming about this whole situation.
No, it is scary, and this is why, again, I come back to Pennsylvania and this election. When you're out on the trail, are people telling you this? Do you get the sense that people are aware that the potential of what we've been talking about is there?
Yeah, definitely, and the crowds I speak to, I'm like, I feel good that they're going to vote, but what they also have to do is make sure all their friends vote and their family votes, and you know, of course, there's the Fox News uncle at Thanksgiving that's never, I mean, they're not reachable. They're going to vote Trump no matter what. But there are persuadable voters in Pennsylvania, and that's what we've always been about. It's like, look, you know, if you may not agree on every issue or whatever, I think we can all agree that you should be winking at Vladimir Putin if you're a United States president. You shouldn't be saying these kind of things. You shouldn't be doing these kind of things. And this is a man who ran on Promi, and now they're talking about, you have Scott Wagner going to Menneson. And that's one more thing Scott Wagner has in common with Donald Trump. They both used a struggling steel town like my own, called Menneson, for a cheap campaign prop, saying, "Oh yeah, we care about these places." Like, you don't care about these places. There's not one thing in your personal, professional life that would demonstrate that you ever cared about the people or these kind of places. And there's just so much at stake. And I'm proud to be on the ticket with Governor Wolf. And I'm proud to say, we've helped build up steel towns that have fallen on tougher times. And the fight has to continue. And we must prevail as Democrats, or, we will not. Well, Pennsylvania won't come back from the damage and dismantling that a Wagner administration would accomplish.
No, I mean, especially on the education front. There's a guy who, I remember, and I remember him saying a couple years ago, we could lay off, 10% of the teachers. No one would ever miss them.
No. I just tweeted that out, Rick. In fact, Philly.com had a great story saying, like, we can't keep up with the teacher shortage. And it's like, this is the guy like, we can lay off 10% of them and we won't even notice. It's like, good stuff, right? Good old Scott Wagner. That's a solution. So so we all have so much at stake, and we can't. We're going to every county, wherever you're at geographically, ideologically. We want your vote. We need your vote, and we're not going to ease up until we get the result that we need on November 7th.
Yeah, the hope is I was just looking at a poll done by the Public Religion Research Institute and the Atlantic that said only 28% of young people between 18 and 29.
I read that today. You're right. Yeah,
they're absolutely certain going to vote. How do you engage that? I mean, I look at you as somebody who is going to energize that age group, going to energize that base, and what's the message to them?
Well, Rick, we had almost 900 people come out. Bernie Sanders came to Pittsburgh this weekend and did an event rally for us. Almost 900 people in the dead of summer on a Sunday afternoon. So it's really encouraging, and a lot of them were those young millennials.
It wasn't 20,000 like Donald Trump would say.
Yeah, yeah. If it was a Trump rally, it would have been thousands and thousands. But yeah, 900 people. It was a great. And then tonight in Shippensburg, it was a lot of older voters. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of enthusiasm, but there was also enthusiasm in 2016. To me, 2016 was such a disaster. We let it slip away. We're not going to let that happen in 2018. And it's just every county, every vote, it all matters. It's not just Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. It's all counties, and every persuadable vote, we want it.
Now, you're currently the mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, one of the poorer communities in the Commonwealth. I wanted to get your thoughts on this new report by the White House Council of Economic Advisors. It's basically saying, the war on poverty is over. It's done. We won.
Yeah, and they're also going to release tomorrow that cheesecake and ice cream aren't fattening either. You don't. It's all just absurd. I mean, no one's taking it seriously. And the war on poverty is over because they want to cut all these programs, and they want more wealth transfer,
Don't get run over.
The tax cut that they passed, the $1.5 trillion tax cut. Yeah, so the war on poverty is over, and it's all going to the people that already are barely getting by already, Rick, as you know, but an extra $1.5 trillion should help. Jeff Bezos just became worth $150 billion. 3 people own as much wealth as 50% of all Americans. 3 people have as much wealth as half of this country. And that's a staggering statement. And now you have all these cities competing for Amazon, and they pay these kind of wages for some of these workers. It just
isn't it disgraceful?
Unfortunately.
I mean, honestly,
yeah, it is.
You look at that, and the only word I can come up with is disgraceful.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jeff Bezos could write a check for $5 billion and build a new headquarters in any city he wants, the way you and I would go shop for a new cell phone. You know, that's how much it matters in his amount of actual net worth. Meanwhile, all these other cities are providing all these economic incentives, and I understand why they are. They have to compete, but it's like this Hunger Games for these kind of cities, and instead of him just saying, you know what, we're going to go where we can make the most impact and we can really be a great corporate citizen and build up the place and not extract the maximum level of concessions and pit Charlotte against Pittsburgh or vice versa. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is really unfortunate. I did want to bust your shoes a little bit. I saw the Thai video.
Yeah.
I saw the Thai video. You've surrendered. You're not going to the Thai, huh?
No. I mean, we had a lot of fun with it, and Governor Wolf is just a really funny and warm guy, and it was a lot of fun, and got a lot of funny feedback at it, and we had people knitting me ties now, and so we're if I have to wear a tie in certain situations, I'm happy to do it. I just want to be our next lieutenant governor because I want to have Governor Wolf's back. And between now and November 6th, do everything that we can to make sure that we don't leave any vote, off on the table. And Governor Wolf absolutely deserves a second term based on the things that he's accomplished during his first term. But we absolutely need him to have another term to protect all those things that we as Democrats collectively value here in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to see you guys pick up a couple of House seats and maybe a Senate seat or two to help maybe actually get some real stuff done.
We're definitely going to pick up the House seats. We're definitely picking up the House seats, and Bob Casey is running a strong campaign, and Lou Barletta really isn't going anywhere. So I'm optimistic, and there's a lot of enthusiasm, but that doesn't mean that we're going to let up. It doesn't mean we're going to ease off. It just means we're going to go as hard as we possibly can. I always believe in running like you're in last place, and because it's just too important not to.
How can we help?
Oh, well, just get the word out, Rick. You help every time you're on the air. I follow you online, and I just want people to understand. It's more than just like, well, I'm going to vote, or it's like, really, like everyone in your circle. It's like it's like the movie that you got to tell everyone they got to see. It's the new restaurant you got to try. It's like, it's got to be that kind of enthusiasm. Like everybody, you got to do this. You got to do this. You got to help. You got to donate. You got to, kick in $50 if you can to support these. I mean, there's every possible thing because it all matters. And some union guys, may not be in lockstep with everything, but it's like, your family's economic security depends on Governor Wolf winning because right to work will dismantle the proud labor heritage and history that we have in Pennsylvania, especially here in Western Pennsylvania, with the Homestead strike and all these other things. Scott Wagner could accomplish what Andrew Carnegie and the robber barons could. They could really, really break a lot of labor, and we just can't let that happen here in Pennsylvania. We just cannot let it happen.
No, I mean, you guys should get 100% of labor's vote without question.
Well, and that's what we want, and it's like they gave some folks gave Trump a test drive. It's been an unequivocal disaster, and right now it's like, look, we know what he's about, and we have to make sure that we hold the line, like protect this house here in Pennsylvania. That's what we got to do.
Good stuff. John, I wish you the best. I hope you'll come back and talk to us as the campaign continues. Keep us up abreast of what's going on and keep us up on the issues.
Rick, text me anytime. I'm always thrilled to be on your. I just got done driving back from Ocean City and campaign stop at Shippensburg, and I am thrilled to be on your show.
Good stuff. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. One of the truly good guys in my view. And I'm hoping people will get out on November 6th, march to the polls, and cast your vote. Because look, I think you made an interesting point there. You gave Trump a test drive. We've got a baby Trump here who's running for governor. Don't let baby Trump near the wheel. Bad. Just bad. Nothing good comes of it. Don't do it. That's simple. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
People are hungry. Me and my people are through. Me and my people are ready. Me and my people are just about due. I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. That was the day hospital workers in Charleston, South Carolina, won union recognition. The 113-day strike reflected all the broader social issues of the day. Led primarily by black women, the strike at the medical college, Charleston County, and several other hospitals intersected civil rights and racial and gender discrimination on the job. Jewel Charmaine Debnam notes that women like Local 1199B President Mary Moultrie, Naomi Watts, and others were essential to the strike, not only as daily participants on the picket line, but also as leaders of the local movement establishment. For months, strikers marched, walked picket lines, clashed with police, and held vigils demanding their right to organize. They defied injunctions and endured hundreds of arrests, nightly curfews, and confrontations with state National Guard. Governor McNair and the hospital boards had initially refused to concede to the workers' demands for union recognition. They claimed workers paid with public funds could not engage in collective bargaining, but the women were steadfast. They pointed to the wage disparities between black and white workers and between male and female workers. They also protested the blatant disrespect and discrimination meted out daily by management. Local longshoremen stood in solidarity with the strikers and threatened a walkout in support if their demands were not met. Coretta Scott King and many other civil rights leaders also played a supportive role. Finally, the union won reinstatement of fired workers, which had touched off the strike. They also won a solid grievance procedure, a minimum wage, and access to a credit union. Victory would be short-lived, however, when the state almost immediately refused to hold up its end of the agreement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, interesting little bit of intrigue. A National Labor Relations Board administrative law judge ruled that the settlement that the Trump administration and McDonald's USA and a number of franchisees were trying to ram through, not sufficient. In fact, the judge turned it back, saying that it wasn't going to solve the problem. And the problem is, this has been going on since 2012. November of 2012, you had the beginning of the Fight for 15 campaign. And I remember it very well because we had some of the very first guests on the program to talk about it. And I remember at the time going, this could be something huge. If labor got behind it, funded it, and pushed, you could organize low-wage workers and turn those poverty wage jobs into good paying union jobs like my grandparents did. Those factory jobs, those auto worker jobs, the retail job my grandmother did, those originally were not family sustaining jobs. But through organizing and collective bargaining and fighting for better wages, hours, and conditions, they turned into good jobs. They turned into something that you could support a family on. What the Obama administration, NLRB, did and what the government was doing during the Obama years was building a case against these big franchisees, McDonald's and others. saying that, if you have a bunch of franchise owners and they're mistreating their workers, or they're cheating them out of wages, or they're, firing them for protected concerted activities, such as trying to form a union, that ultimately the parent company was responsible. And, because what's happened in this country is really very, very clever by the business class. These huge, big behemoth companies, they don't actually own the local fast food joint, or, the local gas station, or the local bar, or, whatever. They don't own those directly. They franchise it out. But they control every single thing they do. They control how you hire, how you operate, how the products are produced and placed and advertised, and all of that. They have absolute control. And what the NLRB under Obama was saying is, look, all of these employees, in McDonald's case, some 8 million across the country, should have the right to form unions and should have the right to bargain for wages. And this barrier between doing that, franchise owners, is something that has to be looked at. So a bunch of these franchise owners fired workers from the Fight for 15 campaign. People went on strike, demanding better wages, hours, conditions. They were subsequently fired, and a charge was filed with the NLRB, and now the judge has ruled. And understand, it doesn't mean that the workers aren't going to get screwed. They are, because ultimately this judge's decision will go to the full board, which is now a Republican majority, and it's going to go by the wayside, I believe. But the fact that this judge came out and said, this isn't going to solve the problem. This is, this is not going to do it. And things are only going to get worse. And because, look, understand, McDonald's wants, and these franchise behemoths, they want out from under this because they don't want the liabilities. They don't want to have to pay the back wages. They don't want to have to pay the penalties. They don't want any part of that. They've got a nice gig going, thank you very much, to where they have outsourced all of the liability, all of the risk, all of the chance. All that's gone. They get pure money into their pocket from the franchise owners kicking up. It's kind of like a mob deal. It's a nice pyramid scheme, if you will. They're at the top collecting all the money and sucking everybody dry. And, well, any chaos or any problems, that's somebody else's problem. And it all rolls downhill to the workers. And I'll tell you, that's really a problem in my view. And one of the things that I was looking at and thinking about this story is, I went and I looked up how much, a company like, a company like McDonald's gets in government subsidies. A company like Walmart gets in government subsidies. And the numbers are just staggering. I mean, just amazingly staggering. And it's one of those things where you just, I look at it and I go, it's almost impossible for me to believe that we spend just in subsidizing Walmart and McDonald's $153 billion a year. Can you imagine what we could do with $153 billion a year? Do you know what kind of investments we could make in the future of this country? In infrastructure, in education, and healthcare. Instead, nope, we're subsidizing the poor wages at Walmart and McDonald's. That's a problem. And it's not going to change under the Trump administration. Absolutely not, because, I forgot to mention, I think it's Executive Order 13843, which is now going to take those administrative law judges out of the competitive civil service process, and we're going to make them patronage jobs again. So ideologues will be deciding that stuff, not career bureaucrats. This is what happens when you have people who don't believe in government, who despise government, and, well, want to use it to destroy you and me. Sad, sad stuff. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, something equally angering to me, another attack on Amtrak. We're going to get some thoughts on that. There was a big rally and press conference today by the Transportation Workers Union. We're going to get some thoughts from them. Quick break. Right back.
Some working working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Governor Rick Scott has declared a state of emergency for 7 counties in Florida, and it's all because
toxic algae blooms choke Lake Okeechobee, threatening drinking water and more in the Sunshine State.
A warm June didn't help matters either.
Ohio takes belated steps to curb toxic algae in Lake Erie. Summer night temperatures rising faster than daytime temperatures. Plus, Ireland set to become the first nation in the world to divest from fossil fuels.
Go Ireland! All of those reports and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
So if you see what looks like pea green soup or something in the water that could be an algal bloom, still enjoy a wonderful day on the beach, on your boat. Just don't get in the water.
Just when I thought it was safe to go back in the water. Algae blooms. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I was a little snarky there about algae, but this is actually a very serious problem.
Yes, toxic algae is toxic, and summer's heat means the return of toxic algae blooms. In Florida, Republican Governor Rick Scott has declared a state of emergency in 7 counties because a massive toxic algae bloom has choked 90% of Lake Okeechobee, fueled by fertilizer runoff from the agriculture industry.
Lake Okeechobee?
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has begun flushing water out of Lake Okeechobee, saying they must flush the lake to lower water levels to reduce the risk of flooding from heavy rainfall. But flushing the algae downstream means that the toxic, smelly, gloppy green goop is headed to Florida's canals, bays, and beaches, impacting tourism, the shellfish industry, and public health. It's a similar story in Ohio, where after years of resistance, Republican Governor John Kasich signed an executive order late last week directing the Ohio EPA and the Departments of Agriculture and Natural Resources to create new regulations to reduce the amount of fertilizer and manure runoff from farms near the western bases of Lake Erie.
We have to constantly upgrade and do what we can, respecting farmers. They're an important part of our system, but to develop a plan that will keep us from having more algae blooms and doing more damage to that lake.
Now, the state government says that voluntary steps taken by farmers so far have failed to sufficiently curb nutrient pollution. That's the runoff of phosphorus and other nutrients from farms that is the leading contributor to toxic algae blooms. However, agriculture industry groups criticized Kasich's move, arguing that the solution to these repeated algae blooms is unclear. They certainly have stake in it. Reducing fertilizer use could reduce crop yields, and that could reduce profits.
That explains that.
Summer nights are warming up faster than days thanks to global warming, with dangerous implications for public health. That's according to new data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that found while daytime temperatures are rising and heat records are increasing in frequency, surprisingly, nighttime temperatures in the United States are rising even faster, at double the rate of daytime temperatures. Sustained hot overnight temperatures give people no opportunity to cool off, especially in regions that are less likely to have air conditioning because they're not used to summer heat. High temperatures kill far more Americans than any other type of extreme weather. Oh, and by the way, warming nights also impact certain crops that require cool nighttime temperatures. But some good news, a record number of Americans now accept that climate change is real. An annual survey of attitudes taken by the University of Michigan, conducted during that recent record-breaking heat wave that set new all-time high heat records across the country, has found that now 73% of Americans think there is, quote, solid evidence of climate change. 60% now accept that human beings have an influence on how the climate is changing. Both of those numbers are the highest in the history of the poll. It seems like the U.S. oil and gas industry is just not that into offshore drilling anymore. The Trump Interior Department on Monday announced the largest ever auction for offshore oil and gas leases on record for the Gulf of Mexico, and that's despite lack of interest and demand from the oil industry. To the last lease sale just a few months ago. At that sale, only 1% of millions of acres offered were actually taken up by the oil and gas industry. Finally, a major victory for climate action in Ireland, where the National Assembly has voted to make Ireland the first nation on the planet to fully divest its public investments from fossil fuels. The fossil fuel divestment bill passed Ireland's lower house and is expected to pass the upper house and become law by the end of the year. It directs the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund to sell off nearly $400 million worth of coal, oil, and natural gas assets as soon as practical, but within the next 5 years. It's the most significant advance to date for the international divestment campaign promoted by environmentalists worldwide.
The writing's on the wall. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow us, and share us worldwide, even in Ireland, on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
For you, I have to risk it all. 'Cause the writing's on the wall. Lessons of the past we all learn with workers' blood. The mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities to the farmlands and trenches full of mud. 'Cause war has always been the boss's way, sir. Come on! The unit forever defending rights. Let's fight the right wing, our workers unite. With our brothers and our sisters from many far-off lands. There is power in our youth.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So today there was a press conference in Washington, D.C. to highlight the fact that there's another attack on Amtrak. This time, I guess they're doing away with full-service dining car service on long-distance train lines. I guess we're going to get boxes. It's going to kind of be like the airlines. You can buy the crummy stuff in the boxes that nobody ever buys. But again, another attack on not just the service of the train, but also the workers. And here to share some thoughts on today's press conference and what this means for Amtrak travelers, I've asked John Feltz to come talk with us. He's the Transport Workers Union Rail Division Director, and also Amy Griffin. She's TWU Local 1460's President. Thanks so much for taking time for me, John and Amy.
Thanks for having us. I appreciate it, Rick.
So, John, walk me through what happened today.
Well, we all met at Union Station, and we leafleted the passengers in the station, and then our group that was consisted of the TWU and Unite Here and TCU AAM. We all belong to a coalition called the Amtrak Service Workers Coalition. And we went to the headquarters at one mast where it was Amtrak had their board meeting today. And we leafleted many of the employees even going in. And Mr. Anderson happened to be walking past going to work, and we got a hold of him, and we had a nice little chat. But unfortunately, he didn't see things our way, and I had suggested that if he wanted to solve the problems that we had, would be willing to talk to him and his board right then and there. And he refused.
Right. So what is this going to mean? What's this going to mean for the workers who are being fired from this? Because, as I've known people who have taken some of these long distance trains, and this is one of those features that people seem to like. What's going to happen to those folks?
What has happened? We had 7 chefs that were furloughed or laid off, and some of them did not have jobs to go back to. Others actually have a choice of either giving up their job or uprooting their families. They have what they call system-wide or nationwide seniority. We had one chef, as a matter of fact, started in New York City, Penn Station. He wound up down in Washington, D.C., and now he had to move out to New Orleans. And as a matter of fact, he really didn't move. He's still stationed at his home. Leaves his family. He's entitled to 2 days off and has to use one of those days to travel cross-country to New Orleans just to work. and it's upset all of our workers' families. Those who could hold jobs can't hold chef's jobs. They have to hold much lower paying jobs through the use of their seniority.
No, that's crazy. Let me get Amy's thoughts on this. Amy Griffin, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
So, when you see this, how are the members taking this? When you look at this, I mean, Amtrak has been under attack by Republicans for a very long time. This is just another one of those things. What are the members thinking?
The members are devastated by this. As like you just said, we've heard over years and years, we've always been in a battle with Amtrak. But this time it's really coming to the cuts. They're devastated. They're worried about their jobs. The morale has gone down because of all these cuts. There's not stability, as there always has been. And like I've told them today, these are not just jobs. These are careers. Railroaders have anywhere from 1 year up to 48 years plus on the railroad. They've made careers out of it. These aren't just jobs. And they're just devastated. They're worried. It's a very unstable environment right now. And also getting boxed lunches on a long-haul train, it's devastating to also the passengers. They're paying like $1,000 to get a cold meal or a microwave hot meal. Passengers deserve better quality of service. They had the best quality service when we have the full-service dining car in there. It's an experience. That is being taken away right now.
Yeah, I mean, does the CEO, does the board get this? That what they're doing is they're actually killing some of the mystique of the travel, of the mode of transportation.
I don't know if they don't get it or if they don't care. I mean, it feels like they look at us and the passengers at this point like we're just numbers on a piece of paper.
Right.
There's not actual service, and we're not actual human beings out there.
Yeah, you're just in the way. You're in the way. You're in between them and their profit.
Yeah.
John, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, Rick, I'm glad you mentioned the Republicans. What Mr. Anderson and the board seems to forget, that it's been our members through all these years that Amtrak has been in existence, have constantly been on the Hill lobbying for funds to keep Amtrak working. Their board hearing, their board meetings are closed to the public, and they don't have shareholders to answer to. We're stakeholders, and the stake we have in this are our members' lives and their families' lives. And they forget this, or they don't even want to know it. And I'll tell you what their ultimate goal is to do away with the long-distance trains altogether. And this isn't going to only affect our onboard service people. This is going to affect, out in Beech Grove, they have one of their main shops, and this is the shop that employs 468 people of different unions and different crafts. Without these trains, they have no work. That shop will be wound up being closed down. And that's another 400 and some odd jobs that will disappear.
So let me ask both of you this, because I've been following this, and I'm a big fan of rail transport. I think during the Obama years, it would have been nice to see much more investment in a train, cross country, faster, high speed, all of that stuff. How much of what you're seeing, boils down to just simply union busting?
100%. Mr. Anderson, as you may or may not know, came from Delta Airlines before. They took over I believe it was Northwestern Airlines. And at that time, Delta had a 14% union workforce. He took over Northwest. It jumped up to 39%. Within the next year, it was right back down to 14%. He demolished the unions that came over from Northwest Airlines. This is what his ultimate goal is. He's a union buster.
And Amy, your thoughts?
Oh, I agree with John 100%. And the goal into this long haul with the food, they started on the long hauls that are the shortest, out of New York and out of Washington, just to Chicago. Eventually, if they can get this program with this box lunches to work, it's going to eventually start moving out to Chicago, out to California. And they really, if any kind of rail travel that they want, is only going to be on your corridors. They don't want the long haul, to connect the country. That is the goal, to get rid of the long hauls 100%. And they're starting with the shorter long hauls to eventually implement this on the longer long haul trains.
So is the goal, because I know there are a lot of, and I've talked to, Republicans who think, if it can't be done for a profit, it shouldn't exist. I've always been a believer in public transportation. It shouldn't have to make money. It's there for the common good. We wanted to, to break even. We wanted to do okay. But, this idea that it has to always turn a profit seems to be one of these dooming kind of philosophies, in that, look, it's there for the common good. It's there to move people around. And if we don't have it, if people can't access it at a reasonable price and get good service, they're going to go somewhere else. And it just seems this kind of thing is just very short-sighted to me.
You're 100% right, Rick. And what they seem to forget and don't want to get in their heads, that there is not a passenger rail in the world that runs out of profit. And I'll tell you something else they seem to forget. Unfortunately, on 9/11, the tragedy that we had, Amtrak was the only service that was running in this country. If you remember, every airplane was grounded.
Right.
Amtrak was the only one. Our onboard service workers are the first responders. They're the ones who respond to emergencies. These two tragic accidents that Amtrak had recently with their derailments, it was our onboard service people that assisted those passengers in getting them off the trains.
Yeah, it just seems to me that instead of squeezing this to death, what we need is massive investment to upgrade, massive investment to make service better, to make it a better experience for passengers, so that they'll choose that. And also, as I said at the beginning before, I would love to see a much more investment in high speed rail. And I know Amtrak does a good job, but I'm talking bullet rates at this point.
You're 100% right, and they have to upgrade their facilities, our trackage, to be able to handle those type of trains.
So Amy, when you're out there talking today, when you were talking to passengers and you were talking to the public, what kind of a response did you get from them? I know what your members are saying, and I get what the board's saying. What do the passengers think? What are their feelings?
Oh, their feelings, they support us 100%. They were thankful. They thanked me for being out there, putting a spotlight on this. They ride the trains. They're very supportive. We have a lot of regular riders out there that are very supportive of us. Also, I wanted to mention, Rick, as far as the food and beverage, we, the unions, have at times put in our sense, my members, on how to help them save money. And we did on one long haul, if I'm correct, it was about 2 years ago, we saved over $1 million by one of our suggestions. That has fallen wayside. They do not want to listen to us.
See, to me, it just, this, and I know the right wing keeps throwing at me that, unions are adversarial, but it always seems that the adversarial part comes from management. Wouldn't you want suggestions from the people who are closest to the problem, being the workers? Wouldn't it be better if the board called you guys in and sat down at the table and negotiated this, instead of, just having you guys on the menu? It just seems counterproductive on such a high level.
Oh, you're 100%, Rick. And like I said, we have worked with them before and shown them how they can cut costs and not hurt the service and still give the top-notch service. And the 1 year they saved over $1 million. That has fallen wayside. Yeah. They are not speaking with us now. They're not asking for us to meet with and see, to work together on how to make this the railroad top-notch and be able to save money. They just don't want to speak with us.
Yeah, they just seem to be imposing their will. So let me ask you this, because this is one of those good things that I say, that every worker in this country should be a union member, so that when these things happen, and they do happen, that there's someone who's got your back. There's someone who's going to stand next to you. What do we do? What are you doing? What can our listeners do to help? How do you stop this?
Well, Rick, what we're going to do, our next campaign, we're going to move to New York City, carrying this to New York City and to Boston and then to Chicago. Those are the main areas that these long-distance trains originate out of. And we're going to bring our fight to those cities and to Amtrak's locations in those cities. And as far as your listeners, they could help. Get in touch with their congressmen. Get in touch with their senators. Let them know what's going on. Let them know how important Amtrak is and how important our workers are to Amtrak. We have the support of many of the rail passenger associations. As a matter of fact, Mr. Paul Dyson, he's the president of RailPAC. They his association covers California and Nevada. He took a red eye last night to come and join us at our rally. We have full support of these national rail passenger associations. If anyone wanted to go to what they call Amtrak Cardinal, that's a Facebook of Amtrak passengers that ride the long-distance train to Cardinal. We have their full support on their Facebook. We're getting the support, but that's what we need. Go to our Facebook page. It's the Amtrak Service Workers Council, and you'll see even more and more support. We need all the support we can get. We appreciate it from your listeners, and we appreciate you giving us this time to let the public know what's happening and how they can help us.
No, we'll make sure we get links out so people can participate and keep up with what's going on, because we know this isn't the end of the attacks. It's only the beginning. John, Amy, I appreciate the time. Please keep me up to date on what's going on and come back with us as things develop.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And once again, we will not go away. We are a coalition of unions that Mr. Anderson and this board have never faced before. We will continue to fight, and people like you that give us a platform will help us. Thank you so much.
Good stuff. Thanks so much, John. Thanks so much, Amy. No, I mean, the reality is this, to me, another one of those reasons that every working person in this country should have a union standing up for them and beside them. That simple. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Come to talk.
We're the first ones to die. The first ones in line for that pie in the sky. And we're always the last when the crab is shed out. For the worker is working when the fat counts about. We're the first ones to stop. We're the first ones to die.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That Friday, thousands of workers in the Chicago stockyards walked off the job. A serious union organizing drive had been underway in the yards since June. One of the organizers of the butchers was John Kikulski. John declared it would be a campaign that included workers who were Polish, Irish, Lithuanian, and in fact, every race, color, creed, and nationality. This was an important pledge because earlier unionization efforts had failed to unite the workforce and had often excluded black workers. Yet the years of racial barriers to unionize proved hard to break down. While 90% of the white workers joined the union, black recruitment lagged behind. Tensions between the newly arriving Eastern European workers and more established white workers also simmered. Despite these setbacks, the stockyard owners were alarmed by the success of the union drive. They sent in 300 mounted policemen to disrupt union meetings and monitor the workers' movements. Angered at the police presence, 10,000 workers walked off the job. They returned to work on Monday, but began organizing for a strike. On July 26th, the workers issued their demands to management for better pay and safer working conditions. The next day would be one of the most infamous days in Chicago history. A group of white Chicagoans stoned and killed a black boy who was swimming and had accidentally drifted into a whites-only part of Lake Michigan. For the next week, a race riot engulfed the neighborhoods surrounding the stockyards. 1,000 black families lost their homes to arson. 23 black and 15 white residents were killed. Any hope of racial unity had been crushed, and as a result, the strike failed. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. You fascists are bound to lose.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. As someone responding to one of our tweets pointed out, he wanted to go from Atlanta to Savannah, Georgia. Said that the only way to get there was to go through Washington, D.C. 18-hour trip. And look, for me to go from where I live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to Washington, D.C., I got to go through Philadelphia. I've got to go all the way over, and then I got to go down. There's no direct route. And this is what the Republicans have done masterfully, and even some Democrats. The idea of having a rail system where you could actually get around, most people think is a great idea. For instance, I would love to be able to go to Washington, jump on a train, be there in an hour and 40 minutes. Or if you've got a really good high-speed rail, be in there like in an hour. Or even 2. It's how long it takes to drive. When you throw traffic in there, it's probably 4 or 5. I would love to be able to get on the train and go to Cleveland where my family is. We just don't have that infrastructure. And look, we don't have the vision for it. As a country, the lobbying majority, the people who dole out the checks, they don't want it. They want you stuck on your automobile. They want you stuck buying gasoline. They want you stuck, paying tolls. Instead of having a system where we move people around as efficiently as possible and as cost effective as possible. And I've taken, kind of a beating over the years of saying that public transit shouldn't operate at a profit. It shouldn't even be allowed to operate at a profit, because everything that they bring in should be reinvested. Every bit of profit that they get should be put into making the service better. And yet we've got it in our heads in this country that, anything that doesn't make a profit, that's socialism, it's bad. There's some things that shouldn't be operated for a profit. Sorry, I just don't think there are. Healthcare, for instance. I just don't see my misery being someone's profit, or your misery being my profit. Parking, got to be honest, I got to park my car somewhere. Why should I have to pay someone $100 to park my car in New York? Somebody's making out huge, when these are things that should have been, in the hands of we the people, and that money should be reinvested into better quality services. And I know you sound like a socialist, Rick. No, I'm looking at how we provide the best services for we the people. I grew up and I told you this before, I grew up in a housing project in the west side of Cleveland. We were not on the bus line. So if you're not on the bus line, that ability to get to the job centers, which are in these industrial parks, outside of in the suburbs, if you can't get there, you can't get those jobs. And some argue that's by design. Some argue it's just the inefficiency of the system. Whatever your argument is, it isn't there. And good luck in some, small towns or small cities or rural areas trying to get around with public transportation today. You're waiting 4 or 5 hours for a bus. It's crazy. If you miss it, heaven forbid. Now, I remember when I was working in Cleveland, I used to take the Rapid downtown. I drive my car to the Rapid station. I jump on the Rapid. I was downtown in 20 minutes. No traffic, no parking, no problem. It was done. Pick up a transfer, hop on one of the loops. The loop would take you right to where I needed to go. It was efficient. It was cost effective. And it cut down on traffic on the road. And this is what we need more of. And it needs to be efficient. It needs to be timely. And it needs to be all of those things. But yet we've got political leaders, man. Nope. I remember, when Obama was talking about high-speed rails, you had people like Scott Walker there in Wisconsin saying, no, we're not taking the money. It's crazy. Just plain crazy. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can share them with me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. Another quick night Again, I'd appreciate your thoughts. And if you missed any of the show, grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to the Rick